Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back with another part of reading for Black Cake, a novel by Charmaine Wilkerson. Happy Friday for you all, because this is when you'll be seeing this. Once again, I'm cheating, and all I did was change positions and come to a different side of the room. Let's go ahead and start this next part. Go ahead, do me a favor, and hit the like button as we begin. Sugar. It was the sugar episode that got Marble called into the CEO's office. She hadn't been up to George's suite in months, since before she started dating the coffee guy. There was no need. They saw each other often enough in all those ways that the head of a media production company and one of his star presenters tended to see each other. Whenever she got back to London, she usually ended up getting lunch with him anyway. Sometimes George's wife, Jenny, would join them. Marble liked seeing them together. The teasing, the mock protest, the touch of a hand. George was one of the good guys, and Marble was sorry to see him feeling so uncomfortable. A viewer of influence had telephoned him about the sugar episode. In George parlance, that meant a big money advertiser had dialed his personal line to complain about the show, bypassing the editorial group in the process. Was it the S word? Marble asked. I do believe it was the S word, George said. Marble had simply reminded viewers of a few things that everyone already knew, and only then because someone had written into the live program to ask why Marble didn't profile more desserts made with cane sugar. As many of my viewers know, I focus mostly on traditional local foods. Many longtime recipes herald as local traditions use cane sugar, but I prefer to talk about recipes made with foods of a local origin, indigenous foods, or foods under local production for at least 1,000 years. This is why I tend to stay away from recipes that use cane sugar, unless they come from Asia, where, as far as we know, it originated. Sugar cane has traveled from its indigenous territories, having been taken from Asia to Africa and other areas of the world, including the Americas. By the 1600s, sugarcane and the sweet liquid pressed from its stalks had been taken hold in the Caribbean, turning some men into kings of commerce and others into slaves. Oh, the S word was slaves. Marble was proud of that episode. Now, don't get annoyed, Marble, George was saying. I'm just letting you know, okay? It's just that you already had the argument with the Italian coffee tycoon about exploration of producers, and now you say that anything made in Europe with sugar can't be considered traditional? Cane sugar? Huh? Cane sugar? Not beet sugar, right? And not just traditional, local traditional folks of local origins, right? Plus, we didn't have an argument. The coffee guy and I, we had a difference of perspective. In the end, he came to understand what I was really saying. There had, in fact, been only those few moments of tension between Marble and the coffee man until they talked it out on the show, until they'd gone together the following month, until they stayed out late, talking until they'd meet the following weekend in Milan, until they kissed a long, tender goodbye before taking trains back to their respective cities. But she wasn't going to tell George any of that. She didn't want him thinking about the fact that her late husband, who had also been Italian, she didn't want him feeling sorry for her. It's just that you're supposed to be a food guru, not a political commentator. It's so interesting how when you talk about the truth of some things, people try to turn it into politics. And maybe her approach wasn't liked by, the person with the big money, the person who paid for advertising and things of that nature. But the truth is the truth. And society has a way of taking out things that aren't truth. What are you saying, George? That I should just share recipes and not tell people anything about food, about where it comes from? That's not what I do. I'm not a chef. My specialty is where food comes from. You know that. And if you talk about the way in which food moves around the world, you can't help but mention the social, economic, and political facts behind it. It doesn't mean I'm engaging in political commentary. George stood up and walked around to the front of his desk and sat down in the chair next to Marble. Marble. I am your biggest fan, and you know that. I just loved that okra episode. You are a fan of the money I make, Marble said, raising an eyebrow. Money that allows you to do the shows that you want, George said. Oh, and now you're just being mean. And now you're just being a diva. They both laughed. No, George, really. I'm not sure what you expect me to do. Are you censoring me? Oh, I don't even know what I expect you to do. No, I don't want to censor you, but perhaps you could think about the wording a bit more next time. Sure, we need to take a hard look at history, but we don't want to have our viewers feel sheepish about using a spoonful of sugar. Ah, Marble said, nodding slowly. You know we're aiming to sell distribution rights to international markets. Mm-hmm, Marble said. She stood up, leaned over, and pecked George on the cheek. How's Jenny? She's good. Misses the kids. Why don't you come around sometime? It's easier for her at the end of the day. Lunch is always a stretch. I'll do that. I'll call her. Marble wasn't angry at George, but she was irritated about that phone call. She went back to her desk and clicked on a web link to the sugar episode. I don't believe that we can fully lay claim to a tradition if we are not willing to recognize what we have taken from other cultures over time, for better or for worse. I'm not mad at it. The truth is the truth. Sitting there watching herself on the screen, Marble realized what the subject of her next book was going to be. She would take a 180-degree turn. She picked up a pencil and wrote in all caps, sugar. Wanda. Okay, so we went from Marble to Wanda. Who are these people? She had always been a lovely child, studious and charming, just mischievous enough to be entertaining, never getting herself into any real trouble. But later, Wanda Matter's daughter was dealt a rough hand. She struggled to bring her pregnancy to term after her husband's sudden death. Wanda and her husband pleaded with Mabel to stay in London full time, but Mabel insisted on going back to Italy with the baby, and she was still there 16 years later, even though their grandson spent much of the year in a boarding school here in the UK. Okay, so Wanda must be Marble's mom. Thank goodness Mabel's work brought her home from time to time. Wanda was happiest when she had her daughter nearby. She loved how ordinary this felt, being able to ride her bicycle over to her daughter's flat, being able to sit down with her for a cup of tea, being able to add a few drops of water, to Mabel's orchids while Mabel squinted at her laptop. So she's still calling her Mabel even though she wants to go by Marble, I'm guessing. Just a few more minutes, and Wanda would be on her way home. But first, she leaned her hip against her daughter's back and read a few lines of the computer screen. No, Mummy, Mabel said, putting her hands up in front of the screen. Wanda loved it that her daughter, almost 50 years old now, still called her Mummy. She leaned in again to peek. Sugarcane, a grass with stalks as thick as bamboo, squeezed to produce a sweet liquid that ultimately changed the world. I really don't want anyone reading this right now, Mummy. What's it for, dear? Without looking up, her daughter said, I'm thinking of writing another book. These are just notes I'm making for when I get back home. Did Mabel say home or did she say Rome? No, she didn't say home because this was her home near them, here in London. This was the center of everything that their daughter and grandson needed in life, wasn't it? Wanda and her husband had dedicated their lives to making it so, because more than anything, this was who they were. They were Mabel's mom and dad. Something about this don't sound like what? Huh? Okay. Then, because monkey talks. Because monkey talks, a swallow infant girl born in the winter of 1969 to an unwed secretary from the West Indies was not given up for adoption through the official channels, but was transferred instead directly into the hands of a well-off London couple who had paid the home for unwed mothers handsomely for privilege. Wanda and Ronald Martin did not think of it as buying a baby. Y'all see now why we just heard about those two people? Wanda is Mabel's mom. Now we're finding out Mabel was adopted, bought from an orphanage of unwed mothers, from a West Indian mom, Covey, aka Eleanor is my thoughts, but we'll see. Tell me yours. Wanda and Ronald didn't think of it as buying a baby. They thought of it as speeding up the process. They had filled in the applications. They had done the interviews. They had waited and waited. They had held out hope. They had nearly lost hope. By the time the girl reached adolescence, her adoptive parents, who were both white, could see that their daughter was likely what some would call a child of mixed race. But they pretended not to notice. Wasn't race an outdated concept anyway? But it was true that their daughter looked very different from them. Darker, taller, thick-set. They told her she resembled one of her grandfather's people. They told themselves that she had always been theirs. They told themselves that she was their baby girl and that nothing and no one would ever change that. So they lied. The girl don't even know she's adopted, because why would you say that you resemble someone from your grandfather or whatever and not say that, you get this from your mother or something like that? Height. It was only when Mabel Martin's body had fully bloomed into adolescence that she had begun to worry about the fact that she did not resemble her parents. It was sometime after that gamey smelling American boy at school had groped her and called her brown sugar before her growing discomfort with her bust and height had evolved into a more specific agitation over the fact that she was taller than the Randall boy who lived 2 houses down and with whom she had fallen suddenly and desperately in love. By age 17, Mabel was also taller and softer than both of her parents. Her mother pointed out that she had gotten her heft and nose from her maternal grandfather, whom she had never known and who could only be seen in a pockmarked brown portrait on her mother's dresser drawer. "See?" Mabel's mother said, smiling. No, Mabel didn't see, but she too smiled and nodded. I can't tell people what to do when it comes to adoption, but I do believe that at some point you should tell your kids, and I feel like you should have someone there to be prepared to help them with what that does mentally. I have family members that have been adopted, and one of the things that I appreciated is very early on, we knew. Like to the point where my oldest aunt had some difficulties, struggle with drugs and things of that nature. And my youngest aunt adopted her. And she knew very early on. And they didn't tell us kids, but my cousin who knew she was adopted told us. So I just feel like it's important not to keep these from people, because the longer you wait, I feel like it gets worse. But I guess I can't say what to do because I've never been in the position. I personally feel like if I was adopted, I would want to know. And I understand for some people, they worry about what other problems that may cause in the other person as far as feeling abandoned or something like that. But I just think you should know. All right, back to the book. Nearly 35 years later, Mabel, now Marble, would feel her phone buzz as she sat under the helmet dryer at a beauty shop in Rome. She would see the words "estate" of pop up on her screen and understand instantly that the email from an American legal firm whose name she had never seen before had something to do with the fact that she was 6 feet tall and had none of the pinkish tone about her face that both of her parents did. Marble would realize then that she had been waiting for this message for most of her life. By then, she would be old enough to understand that if her mom and Dad had lied to her about her origins all these years, it was either out of love or fear or both, because in that moment, these were the very feelings that washed over Marble and drenched the soft folds of her waist. A love of her parents, a fear of what she might learn, a fear of what she might feel. Yes, mostly fear. Because no matter how much her parents had loved her and coddled her and invested in the dreams of her youth, their presence in her life could not extricate the tiny burr that had lodged itself somewhere under her rib cage and bit by bit had expanded over the years, poking at her from the inside. Burr. A feeling that something else a long time ago may have decided that baby Mabel hadn't been worth loving and coddling and investing in. If only she knew. Girl, your mama wanted you, but we're going to see. Her doubts about her family tree had ballooned when her son was born and his doughy newborn face had begun to take shape. His ruddy, veiny skin gradually took on more even, deep olive tone, and his hair grew to a soft, bushy silhouette. Your grandson doesn't look a thing like you, does he, Mom? Marble blurted out one day when she was feeling catty. No, he doesn't, dear, her mother said. You've got a little Italian boy on your hands is what you have, which might have been a reasonable argument had Marble's husband not been a blonde man born to pale-skinned parents. Oh, goodness gracious. As her son, Gio, blossomed into adolescence, all he had to show for his father's side of the family was his freckled nose. After Marble sent Gio to boarding school back in the UK, she continued to live most of the year abroad. She suspected that if she were to spend too much time around her mother and father, they would pick up on the growing doubt in her eyes. She had hinted around the subject enough times to see that her parents were not going to let her discuss the possibility that she might have been born to anyone but them. On some days, Marble felt deeply resentful. On others, she looked at her mom and dad, thinning around the shoulders with age, and felt guilty. Her own son was the most beautiful thing in her life. Did her parents feel the same way about her? They might worry that they could lose her, as if such a thing were even possible. Or was it? Now, Mrs. Bennet, B&B. After 50 years, you think it was time for me to accept that I would never find my firstborn child, but I couldn't do it. Or what I mean is, I couldn't live with that, not on top of the sense of isolation that had come over me after your father's death. As you know, I was feeling so low about it that I took that surfboard out to the peninsula and nearly broke my neck. A foolish thing. I realize that, but I can't say that I am completely sorry I went out there because, strangely, that is what led me to your sister. If I hadn't ended up in the hospital and needed those follow-up tests afterward, I might have not found out soon that I was sick. I was feeling fine at the time of the diagnosis, so if they hadn't started the chemo, if I hadn't been sitting at home one day with 2 bottles of pills in front of me, too tired to do much else but watch videos on the computer, I might not be here today telling you the whole story. B&B, you know that I'm making this recording because I don't think I'm going to live much longer. I won't lie to you. I'm sorry to go so soon. But in this short period of time, since that day when I came up with that stupid idea to kill myself, I have lived a lifetime's worth of happiness. And now I get to share it with you. So here she is admitting that she tried to kill herself, making B&B know the situation, let it being known that Cable was right. That's what she wanted to do. Coyote. Eleanor Bennet had just finished replenishing her 7-day pill organizer and was sitting at her laptop looking up the nutritional values of various foods, having decided that the only way to slow the progress of her disease, if at all, was through diet. She could feel the medication leaching the good right out of her 70-year-old bones. As she read through an online article, one of those annoying on-screen ads popped up with an image of a coyote. The sight of the coyote's spiny green skin took her back to her early years on the island. In the years that followed her mother's disappearance, Pearl's maternal presence with her daily talcum dusted hug would be a source of great comfort to her, except on Mondays because Monday nights was soup night. Not bouillon based night, not pepper pot night, but beef and vegetable night, which involved the dreaded chocho. In California, she had learned to call the vegetables coyote. Coyote is chocho? Hmm. She had discovered that chocho, the local word, sounded like the term some Spanish speaking people used for a woman's nether regions. It was an association after all those years of resistance to the bulbul's lizard green dishwater flavored squash had brought her a, a perverse sense of satisfaction. She liked to believe that the chocho, were it a person, might be made to feel a bit awkward. She could never have imagined that one day it might deliver the surprise of her life. Just the sight of the coyote on her computer screen was enough to make Eleanor's mouth turn down at the sides, but she clicked on the video box anyway. A narrator explained that it had been spotted at a rural market in Italy. Not in the Caribbean, the speaker said. Not in Asia, but right here in Southern Europe. She knew this narrator. There was something familiar about the woman's voice. Just then, the camera moved from the child and past the presenter's fleshy throat, and Mrs. Bennett found herself looking into the eyes of a middle-aged woman who looked just like her. What a way to find out! Only with lighter skin and darker hair, and whose voice Eleanor now realized was a close variation of her own. It was there, right in front of her eyes, but Eleanor kept telling herself that it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible that Eleanor had searched for her daughter in vain, only to have her appear just like that on her computer screen. Her baby, Matilda. It wasn't possible. Or was it? Oh, so she named her baby after her mom. There was a name written on the video. Eleanor opened a search window on the internet and typed in Marble Martin. There was her photo, and there was her bio. She had been born in London in 1969. This woman was Eleanor baby Matilda. She knew it now. From the way she felt in her heart, from the way she felt her heart swell inside her to fill the hole that had always been there. Despite her shock, Eleanor was able to register the irony of the moment. On the worst nights of the past 50 years, as she lay limp from the sorrow of having had her firstborn taken away, as she searched in vain for her daughter, as she closeted her anguish from her husband and other children, she would reach way back to the Monday evenings of her childhood, when shunning the coyote had been her chief concern, when she still believed that her mother would be coming back home, and before she learned that you could love a child even when it had been forced into your womb. And it would be the memory of being pestered to eat that steaming bowl of soup, then being wrapped in the quilt of Pearl's embrace that would turn out to be her greatest source of comfort. Prognosis. 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 All these years, Eleanor had only wanted to find her firstborn daughter. Now that she knew who she was and how to contact her, she realized that she couldn't do it. It was too late. It wouldn't be right, not with this prognosis for her, essentially a stranger, to walk unbidden into her daughter's life only to tell her that her birth mother was about to die. I think she'd want to hear from you anyway, Charles said. I think she'd appreciate being given the chance to hear you say that you have always wanted to find her, that you never really wanted to give her up. Imagine what a gift it could be. Charles was good. He had this way of convincing a person, but by the next morning, Eleanor had already changed her mind. Things are moving too fast, Eleanor told Charles. My other children need to know first, then we'll call her. Eleanor took Charles's hand. I'm sorry things have turned out this way for us, she said. This stupid illness. Charles leaned over and kissed her on the forehead, then on her cheek, then in the crook of her neck, pushing his nose into her skin until she laughed. Oh boy. That is rough though. You finally find your kid after all these years. You see her, and now you have to go back and forth about whether or not you can reach out because you know that you're probably going to no longer be here. Hey, baby girl. Oh, her baby girl. She called her once, but didn't have the courage to speak. Eleanor had a UK mobile number for Marble Martin. It didn't seem possible, but that was what investigators were for, Charles had said. From what she read in the pile of papers that Charles had given her, Marble was a long-distance commuter living between London and Rome. Eleanor reread that Marble was a sort of stage name and that she'd actually been christened Mabel Matilda. So her name still did stay with her. Her heart did a thump when she first read her daughter's middle name, Matilda, her own mother's name. The people who'd adopted Eleanor's baby had kept the name that she'd given her. Eleanor could call back another time when she felt ready. She didn't want to frighten the child, to shock her, to betray the people who had spent 50 years of their lives raising her and loving her. This needed to be handled with tact. Plus, her daughter might not want to talk to her. Eleanor had to be prepared for that, too. For now, it was enough to have her daughter saying, hello? Hello? What a thing that was, to hear her own voice coming back at her. It was confirmation that after all these years of separation, Eleanor's baby girl was still part of her, had taken something with her when she was pulled away from her mother's nipple for the last time. Some things really are a nature versus nurture thing. And it's clear that in this case, yeah, that's all her. It's funny because sometimes when I say certain things, I hear my mother in me. And other times when I laugh or do certain things, I hear my father. So her saying this is like, yep, I can see that. I can see it. Iguana. When the phone rang, Mabel had been lying on her back watching an iguana. She was thinking that she'd been right all along to come to this beach so far away from everything. As much as she tried, she hadn't been able to make peace with her doubts about her parents and her origins. She needed to think. She needed to be in a place where no one had any expectations of her. And this was the place. She knew in the minute she saw the gleaming black eye fixed on her from above as she watched the iguana did its thing on the sand right near her face. But Marble didn't mind the poop. Ew. I just realized what doing this thing meant. It was a work of art. The stillness of this creature, its spidery digits clinging to the tree limb, the frigid ridge along its back. Marble shifted her eyes to the turquoise waves crawling up the shell. White sands breathed in the nutty scent of her own skin, warming in the sun, then checked the new headlines on her tablet. There'd been a fire at a nuclear power plant in France, another massive earthquake in Italy, more refugees drowning in the Mediterranean, and fighting just about everywhere else. People had troubles, big troubles. But for these few days, Marble wanted to focus on her own, far from the photo shoots and microphones and meeting rooms where she could let her feelings float and hover unabashed above her body and do nothing but gaze up at a mottled lizard as big as her dog. She thought of her dog at home and hoped the neighbor boy wasn't giving him too much to eat. How are you, puppy man? The boy always asked her dog, and Bobby always answered the boy with a little leap. The boy, now almost a man, used to go to school with her son, used to clamber up trees with her son, kept coming back to see her son when he was home on holiday from school. Ooh. Excuse me. Ooh. When Gio first left for boarding school, the neighbor boy would sit on the front steps of Marble's building, running a stick along the ground until Marble would open the door. Over the years, she struggled to look, excuse me, at his broadening shoulders, as his downing new mustache, at this child who kept on growing right before her eyes while her son was so far away. I wonder why her son was so far away. Like, did she put her son so far away because she had to travel so much? Like, why did you send him away to boarding school? Why didn't you leave him with your parents? Or, I don't know, because her parents are older. Let me not say that. But this kid had known her son since the two of them were in diapers. So finally, one day she said to him, "Want to watch the dog for me?" The iguana shifted its neck, then settled back into its gray and whitish stillness. Marble closed her eyes and imagined herself as the lizard, morphing into a lichen covered mass of stone, sleeping through the long, chilly hours of the night and coming to life only in the warmth of the sun. She was holding on to this thought when her mobile phone started to vibrate. An unlisted number. "Hello?" Marble answered. No one spoke, but she heard an intake of breath. "Hello?" Nothing. The signal was gone. She waited for a while before putting her phone away. She knew that if it was important, whoever had called would call her again, but they didn't. So that was her bio mom calling at the time. Now, inheritance. Benny is in the bathroom, washing her hands and looking at herself in the mirror. She has only ever seen her father's features in her face, plus her mother's lopsided smile. Now she knows what else she inherited from her mother's side of the family: her skin. For one, Benny is so pale in comparison to her brother and parents that if she didn't look as much like her brother, she might have doubted her origins. This must have come from her mother's father. It has never really bothered her before not knowing everything about her family. Benny and Byron were raised to believe that their parents were both orphans. Unanswered questions came with the territory. This is who they have always been: an African American family of Caribbean origin, a clan of untold stories, and half chartered cultures. Now Benny finds herself wondering more specifically about the generations that came before her parents, the arrivals from the distant regions, the lives they lived, the different culture influences. Benny is thinking too about another kind of inheritance, a spirit of defiance that she sees now comes from her mother. Her mother, too, struggled to find her way despite other people's expectations, other people's definition of the kind of woman she was supposed to be. Her mother, too, kept closing doors and moving. If only she had said something sooner. In her recording, Eleanor said that Benny's dad really did lose both of his parents, though by then he was already a young adult. After Gibbs Grant moved to Britain to study and then dropped off the radar, folks back home must have assumed that Gibbs, like others before him, had simply drifted away on the current of his new immigrant life. His mother's relatives might have tried to find him, but surely they could not have imagined that he would be hiding in plain sight under an altered name with a woman who was believed to be dead. Benny's mother talks about feeling like a ghost after the death of Benny's father, feeling like there was no one around anymore to recognize her for who she really was. The reality of her mother's situation is beginning to sink in. Over time, Eleanor Bennett had given up parts of herself until most of who she had been was gone. Yeah. Family, country, name, even a child. And she hadn't felt free to name her losses. Benny and Byron would never have been enough to fill the gaps that remained, would they? Benny and Byron had never been enough. Benny pulls a towel off a rack, sits down on the toilet lid, and buries her face in the mound of terry cloth, taking care not to let her brother and Mitch hear her crying. I don't think that her mother didn't appreciate the fact that she had them too. I think that that's what kept her keep helped her to keep going for a long time, was having the love of her life and being able to build a family with him. But let's continue. Down the hall, Byron is in the kitchen, grinding more coffee, looking down at his hands. He and Benny look so much alike they could be twins, were it not for the 9 years and several shades of color between them. Apparently, Benny takes after their mother's father, and Lynn Cook Guy, the man whose mistakes drove their mother away from the island. Being the children of people from the Caribbean, Byron and Benny have always taken for granted that they might have ancestors from other various backgrounds. Very true. You do. My family is like such an array of culture. It's beautiful to see, though. But in his heart, Byron is a California kid and a black man first. This is his identity. Of course, in the minds of others, he is a black man first, second, and always, which would be fine if it weren't to the exclusion of everything else. If Byron ever has any doubt about the weight of color in his world, he only has to look at Benny. His sister was always a sloppy driver, capable of putting the fear of God in you on the freeway, but Benedetta, with her sand colored skin, was never and has never been pulled over by the police. While Byron averages this 3 to 4 times a year. It's getting to the point where Byron is afraid to drive at night. It's getting to the point where he's declined to visit certain friends in certain neighborhoods after a certain hour, not out of fear of crime, but out of fear of being stopped by the police. That goes to show my ignorance, because I was like, why are they stopping him in a Jeep? I didn't even think about the fact that, because I know that, sometimes you get pulled over driving while black and all those other things. I get that. But I was like, hey, why y'all pulling over him because he's in a Jeep? But it's not just because he's in a Jeep. It's because of who the man is, what he looks like. And just that quickly, even though I know this is very much so a thing, because I've been in a really, really nice car with my man and we got pulled over and he wasn't doing anything, and they just ran his plates and wanted to see his license and registration. I've been followed before, riding his car, taking his vehicle into his neighborhood, to the point where turn for turn the officer was following me, and I know he was running the plates, and you can't see who's driving the car from certain angles because of the tint. I don't think. I need to look at that next time. Anyways, my point is, I was followed too. So I kind of get it. And I don't know why I didn't even think of that when I said that earlier. At this point, it doesn't even matter what you're driving. Oh, geez. It has gotten to the point where the last time he needed a new car, he bought a less sleek model, one that wouldn't catch the eye of someone who didn't think a black man should own a certain kind of vehicle. Because there's that too. But he would never admit this to anyone except Cable. Oh, goodness gracious. What does his British sister look like? He wonders. How does she navigate her world? Byron can't resist. He gets online and searches for Marble Martin on his phone. Apparently, she has a huge following in the UK. He swipes and clicks until he finds a photo. He is stunned. Does this marble person know? Byron wonders how much she looks like their mother. The woman is pale as Benny is, but there is no mistaking those eyes and that nose and that mouth. Those are his mother's eyes, nose, and mouth, the sight of which fills Byron with a longing that he can only describe as a kind of homesickness. Yeah. Byron opens the freezer to put the remaining coffee beans inside as he sees a disc-like form wrapped in tinfoil. There it is, the black cake. He reaches out and touches it. I want you to sit down together and share the cake when the time is right, his mother wrote in her note. You'll know when, she said. Now he understands when. Benny opens, anonymity. Whew. Benny opens her suitcase and pulls out her silver gray sweater. She refuses to wear all black to her mother's funeral tomorrow. She flaps open the sweater and hangs it over her old desk chair. She hadn't planned on being in her old bedroom. She never slept in her childlike home without her parents. Benny had thought that staying in a neutral place tonight would have been easier. She has always found comfort in the anonymity of travel and the no man's land of vast airports, lounges, the plastic smell of rental cars, the hotel key cards that wipe your identity clean on the checkout. all those spaces free of emotional weight, but this time it was different. Benny had booked a hotel for her stay here in Orange County, but when she found herself lying in the standard double room so close to her childhood home, it filled her with a sadness that went beyond the death of her mother, a downward draft that pulled at her when she touched the brushed chrome faucets in the bathroom, the dimmers in the bedroom, the tiny tubes of fake cream beside the coffee machine. The room was spacious and clean and carpet, quite just the way she needed it to be after a cross country flight. But it was only 3 miles from the house. Byron told her to stay over. Betty didn't think she would. Byron wasn't even talking to her except for covering the I always say this word wrong. Ob- Obligatory comments. Keys, coffee, cremation. But after listening to the first part of her mother's recording, after saying goodnight to Mr. Mitch, she looked at her father's armchair and knew that she couldn't bear to go back to the hotel. Of course, she must have known it would be this way. She had, after all, brought her suitcase to the house with her. Mm-hmm. Depth. Byron's phone is vibrating against the kitchen counter. He's forgotten about his morning appointment at the hairstylist. Haircut no color. He doesn't mind that bit of gray at his temples, but his hair guy warns him he might want to consider keeping it to minimum for a while yet. Byron cancels the appointment. There isn't enough time, though he knows his mother wouldn't have skipped it. His ma would have not gone to a funeral without having her hair done first. His mother would have said it was a sign of respect to do her hair, to check the condition of her clothes, to see if she needed to buy a new shirt. She really was quite conventional in some ways, though, as Byron has come to see, in fewer ways than he'd imagined. But one of his mother's mantras was when he and Benny were kids was dress with respect. That never changed. When Byron first got into his profession, he couldn't have imagined seeing his male colleagues with manicured eyebrows and the woman with hair extensions. Times change, and people should feel free to primp and tweak with the trends. He just never thought it would become a professional necessity for geologists, engineers, and mathematicians to be Instagram ready on any given day of the week. This was more than respect, this was showmanship. Byron supposes he should be grateful for the social media signs that so many people are into the work that he does. He certainly continues to be intrigued by his own profession. With the sonar technology they have now, his team can amass thousands of square kilometers worth of high resolution maps from just one deep sea expedition. On some days, Byron just laughs out loud at the beauty of it all. Byron believes that a lot of people who follow him online really do get how important underwater mapping is. That it isn't just about technology and being able to see the shape of the land below the seas. It's about weather patterns, tsunamis, territorial defenses, fisheries, internet cabling, tracking pollution, and so much more. It's about how we will live in the future. And of course, it's about money. It's always about the money. Byron lies in bed some mornings, staring at the ceiling for a long while, wondering how much of his work is doing good and how much is only opening the gates to profit seekers who will use the information to do things like mine previously uncharted areas of the seabed for precious metals, rare elements, oil, and other riches, much of which he knows benefits his own lifestyle. People talk about responsible management of natural resources. They talk about sustainability and moderation, but Byron hasn't seen a whole lot of these things in the 20 something years of his career. He thought that by doing his work well, engaging the public, aiming for the director's position, he would have done some good. But now that both of his parents are gone, he doesn't know anymore if his life has really made that much of a difference to anyone or anything. His parents sacrificed so much to give Benny and him a good life. Is he doing right by them? Is he doing enough? Byron doesn't know anymore if his parents gave him a gift, or did him a disservice to make him think all these years that he was someone special. He hopes at least that being seen in this profession ultimately will count for something. For all those kids out there who look like him and who might want to follow in his footsteps, or for those who might just need to see their own faces coming back at them, smiling, looking good, being treated with respect. All right, y'all, this is going to be the last one listening. In 1978, NASA launched the first Earth orbiting satellite designed for remote sensing of the planet's oceans. 40 years later, whenever Byron visited students in local schools, he liked to let them know about the black woman who'd been a project manager on the CSAT program. But the students were always more interested to learn that that same woman had been instrumental in developing early GPS technology. Slick, someone would always exclaim, or whatever the word of the day was. Like a lot of people, Byron wasn't aware of any of this when he was in school, but he was already being pulled in that direction. The 22-minute drive from the beach, the surfing, learning how to react in the event of an earthquake. Byron grew up understanding that the earth and its oceans were in constant state of agitation, and by the time he reached college, he knew that he wanted to spend most of his time listening to the seas. Byron hears the rustle and clink of Benny in her room, getting ready for their mother's funeral. It has been Byron's observation that remote sensing, obtaining information about locations without physically being there, is a heck of a lot simpler than gaining understanding of another human being, even when they are right there in the same room with you. He has no idea anymore how to read Benny, how to talk to his sister. There are no machines to help you figure out that sort of thing. And that is the end. And we're gonna stop here, you guys. Ooh, this book, so good that I can't put it down. And I'm not gonna cheat yet. I'm stopping here because I need to start watching some Sister Wives stuff so that I can make sure that I have that out as well. Thank you all so much for joining me. Let me know what you think about this chapter. We're learning a lot. How do you feel about the situation with Marble and how she grew up not knowing from her parents that she was adopted? Y'all tell me your thoughts down below. Until next time.